Something is happening in the world right now. You can feel it in the headlines, in the atmosphere, in the tension that never seems to break, and most people have no idea what it means. But there is an ancient book that described everything you're seeing today. It described it thousands of years before any of it happened. And it was not written to scare you. It was written to prepare you. Every sign, every shift, every crack in the foundation of the world was recorded in advance so that you would not be caught off guard. This is not about conspiracy theories or fear. This is about a specific list of events written down centuries ago that are now unfolding in front of your eyes, one after another. And today we are going to walk through every single one of them, not with panic, not with confusion, but with the kind of clarity that only comes from understanding the source. Because the signs of the last days are not hidden. They were never meant to be hidden. They were placed in plain sight for anyone willing to pay attention and read the words carefully. The first category of signs involves the nations of the earth. Wars, conflicts, and rumors of wars spreading across borders in ways that feel relentless, constant, and impossible to resolve through human effort alone. There was a time when large-scale wars were separated by decades of peace. But now the cycle has shortened. Conflicts erupt faster than they end, and new tensions ignite before old ones cool. Famines in places that once had abundance. Entire regions struggling to feed their own people while the rest of the world watches from behind screens, distracted by entertainment and daily routines. Earthquakes increasing in both frequency and intensity. Not just in the places you would expect, but in regions that have never experienced them before. Shaking ground that was always considered stable. Pestilences moving across continents. Diseases appearing suddenly, spreading rapidly, and revealing just how fragile the systems are that humanity has built to protect itself from the unseen threats. And the response of the nations is always the same. More meetings, more summits, more agreements that dissolve before the ink is dry. Because the solution they are looking for cannot come from a conference room. These are not random events scattered across the timeline of history. They are specific, they are accelerating. And they were spoken about with precise language that matches what the world is experiencing right now. The ancient text says that nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in many different places across the face of the earth. But here is what most people miss. The text does not stop at listing these events. It gives them a name, it gives them a category, it tells you exactly what they represent in the larger picture. It calls them the beginning of sorrows, not the middle, not the end, the beginning. Which means everything you have seen so far is just the opening chapter of a much longer story. And that word sorrows is not a casual word. In the original language, it carries a very specific meaning. It refers to birth pains, the kind of pain that comes before something new enters the world. Birth pains have a pattern. They start slow and manageable, but as the moment of delivery approaches, they increase in frequency and intensity until there is no gap between one contraction and the next. Look at the last 100 years of human history. Look at how the gaps between crises have shrunk. Look at how each decade seems to carry more disruption than the one before it without any pause. The wars grow larger. The famines reach further. The earthquakes hit harder. The diseases spread faster. And none of it is slowing down. The pattern is not random. It is accelerating on a curve. This is not a coincidence. This is a sequence. And the ancient text told you the name of the sequence before the first event in it ever took place on the earth. But the signs in the nations are only the first layer. Beneath the surface of wars and earthquakes, there is a second category of signs that most people never talk about because it hits closer. These are the signs that appear inside human hearts. The shifts in behavior, in loyalty, in the way people treat each other when the pressure of the world begins to squeeze the goodness out of them. The text says that in the last days the love of many will grow cold, not the love of a few, not the love of the worst among us. The love of many, the majority, will slowly drain away. You can see it in the way neighbors no longer know each other's names, in the way families fracture over things that would have been resolved with a single honest conversation just one generation ago. You can see it in the way betrayal has become normalized, people turning on each other not out of necessity, but out of convenience. Loyalty disappearing because it costs too much to maintain in a selfish age. The text says people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, without natural affection, and unable to control their own impulses or desires for even a moment. Read that list slowly, and then look at the culture that surrounds you. Every single trait on that list is not only present, it is celebrated, it is rewarded, it is held up as strength instead of recognized as decay. And here is where the first major shift happens. Because everything up to this point, the wars, the earthquakes, the coldness, all of that could be dismissed as normal human struggle throughout history. But the text reveals something that changes everything. These signs are not scattered. They are simultaneous. Every single one of them converging in the same generation at the same time is the sign itself. No previous generation experienced all of these things at once with global visibility. Past centuries had wars but not global famines broadcast in real time. They had plagues but not worldwide earthquakes tracked by satellites simultaneously. The convergence is the key. One earthquake is a disaster. One famine is a tragedy. But all of them happening together, accelerating together, and being witnessed by the entire world together. That is the pattern. And the ancient text said this convergence would happen in a single generation, not spread across centuries, not unfolding slowly, but compressed into one window of time so tight that no one could miss it. That generation would see all these things, all of them. Wars and rumors of wars and famines and pestilences and earthquakes and the love of many growing cold, all in the same lifetime, all overlapping. So the question is not whether these signs are happening. The question is whether you are willing to accept what their convergence actually means. Because the text does not leave that question unanswered. It means the time is closer than most people think. Not in some vague, abstract theological sense, but in a real, tangible, this affects your daily decisions kind of way that should change how you live right now. But the signs do not stop with the nations and the human heart. There's a third category that is perhaps the most dangerous of all, because it wears a disguise that makes it almost impossible to detect. Deception. The ancient text warns that in the last days, deception will be the primary weapon used against those who are trying to stay alert. Not violence, not persecution. Deception disguised as truth. False teachers would arise, not on the margins, not in the shadows, but in the places where people go to hear truth. Standing behind platforms of authority, speaking words that sound right but carry poison inside them. The text says many will come in the name of the Most High and will deceive many. Not a few, many. The scale of the deception is part of the sign. The sheer volume of false voices is itself a marker. And the deception is not crude. It does not announce itself with obvious lies. It blends truth with error so seamlessly that the mixture becomes almost indistinguishable from the real thing without extremely careful examination. A little truth mixed with a little error is far more dangerous than an obvious lie, because the truth in the mixture makes you lower your guard, and the error slips in while your defenses are down. And this is exactly what the text predicted. A generation drowning in spiritual voices, spiritual content, spiritual language, but unable to discern which voices are genuine and which ones are leading them off a cliff. People following teachings that make them feel good instead of teachings that challenge them to grow. Choosing messages that confirm what they already want to believe instead of words that transform how they actually live. The text calls this a time when people will not endure sound teaching. Instead, they will gather teachers who tell them what their ears want to hear. Comfort over truth, feeling over foundation, preference over principle. And when you look at the spiritual landscape today, this is exactly what you find. A marketplace of voices competing for attention, and the ones that win are not always the ones speaking the most accurately. Signs and wonders would increase. Miraculous displays that capture attention and attract crowds. But the text warns that not every sign comes from a righteous source. Some wonders exist specifically to mislead the sincere. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. That something supernatural can be real and still be deceptive. That a miracle can happen in front of your eyes and still be designed to pull you away from what matters. The ancient text describes a time when the deception becomes so sophisticated that if it were possible, even the most committed, most faithful, most discerning people would be led astray by what they see and hear. That phrase, if it were possible, tells you the level of the deception. It is not amateur. It is not obvious. It is crafted to fool the best of the best. And only one thing protects you from it. Knowing the text itself, not what someone told you about the text, not a summary you heard once in passing, but knowing the actual words so deeply that when a counterfeit appears, the difference is immediately obvious to you. A bank teller does not study counterfeit money. They study real money so thoroughly that the moment a fake bill touches their hand, something feels wrong before they even look at it closely. The same principle applies here. You do not defeat deception by studying every false teaching. You defeat it by knowing the truth so well that the lie cannot survive in the same room with what you carry. And this brings us to the most uncomfortable sign of all, because the deception the text warns about does not only come from outside the community of believers. The most dangerous version comes from within. The text says that in the last days there will be a great falling away, a departure, a mass exodus of people who once stood firm, who once believed, who once carried the fire, walking away from everything they knew. Not because they were forced out, not because someone dragged them away, but because the cost of standing became greater than the comfort of sitting, and they chose ease over endurance when the pressure increased. This falling away is not a minor detail buried in the text. It is listed as a primary sign, one of the clearest indicators that the final chapter is unfolding. When the people who should be standing begin to sit, you can see it now. People who once prayed with passion growing silent. People who once read the text daily, letting dust gather on the cover. Not because they stopped believing, but because they stopped prioritizing. The world offered them something easier. A version of life that did not require sacrifice, did not demand discipline, did not ask them to be different from everyone around them, and they accepted the trade. And the falling away does not happen overnight. It is gradual, a mist gathering here, a compromise there. A slow drift that feels harmless until one day you look up and realize you are miles from where you started. The ancient text warned about this drift specifically because it is more dangerous than a sudden fall. A sudden fall gets your attention. A slow drift puts you to sleep while you're still moving in the wrong direction. And as the falling away increases, something else increases with it. Persecution. The text says that those who remain faithful will face opposition, not just from the world, but from people who once walked beside them. Betrayal from within the community is listed as a last days sign. Friends turning on friends, family members turning on family members. All because the line between standing and falling becomes a dividing line between relationships. People who choose to remain will be mocked, called extreme, called outdated. Not by strangers, but by people who once shared the same beliefs and have now decided that those beliefs cost too much to carry. And this is where the second major revelation emerges. Because most people expect the greatest threat to come from outside, from hostile governments, from secular culture, from those who openly reject the text and its authority. But the text reveals that the most dangerous sign of the last days is not external opposition, it is internal compromise. The erosion does not come from enemies breaking down the walls. It comes from people opening the gates willingly. When the community weakens from the inside, external threats become secondary. A fortress does not fall because the enemy was too strong. It falls because someone inside decided the enemy was not worth fighting anymore. And this is precisely why the text spends so much time warning believers about what happens inside the community. Because the real battle of the last days is not fought on a battlefield. It is fought in the heart. But there are more signs. Signs that stretch beyond the spiritual and into the practical world of knowledge, technology, and the systems that govern human life in ways that were unimaginable just a century ago. The ancient text says that in the last days, knowledge will increase. Not gradually, not at a normal pace, but in a sudden explosion of information that floods the earth and changes the way everything operates. Think about what has happened in just the last 50 years. Humanity went from handwritten letters to instant global communication, from libraries to unlimited information, accessible from a device that fits inside your pocket at all times. The amount of knowledge produced in the last decade exceeds everything humanity created in all previous centuries combined. The acceleration is not linear, it is exponential, and it matches the exact language of the ancient text. And with the increase of knowledge came the increase of travel. The text says people will run to and fro across the earth. Movement, speed, global connectivity. A world that once took months to cross now takes hours. 2,000 years ago, the average person never traveled more than 30 miles from where they were born. Now millions of people cross continents in a single day without giving it a second thought. These are not metaphorical signs. They are literal descriptions of a specific time period that would look fundamentally different from every era that came before it, and there is no century that matches more precisely than this one. But knowledge without wisdom is dangerous, and the text warns that the explosion of information would not automatically lead to understanding. People would have access to more truth than ever before, and still choose to ignore it. That is the paradox of the last days. The truth is more available than at any point in human history. You can read the ancient text in any language, on any device, at any hour, and yet the falling away continues, because access is not the same as hunger. Having the text on your phone means nothing if you never open it. Having the answer within reach means nothing if you never reach for it. Availability does not equal transformation. And while knowledge increases, something else happens in the nations. The text speaks of a specific sign that involves a piece of land no larger than a small state, yet it dominates the attention of the entire world. The ancient text describes a time when the scattered people of a specific covenant would return to the land that was promised to their ancestors. A nation reborn after centuries of dispersion across every continent on Earth. This was considered impossible for nearly 2,000 years. A people without a homeland, scattered among every nation, preserving their identity through generations of exile, and then in a single day, the nation was reborn. No other people group in recorded history has been dispersed for that length of time, and returned to their original land with their language, culture, and identity intact. It has never happened before, and it has never happened since, and the text said it would happen. Centuries before the dispersion even began, the regathering was already written. The return was already promised. The restoration was already locked into the timeline of the last days as a sign. And once that nation was reestablished, the text says it becomes the focal point of global tension, a burdensome stone for all nations. A tiny piece of land that the entire world cannot stop arguing about day after day. Turn on any news broadcast on any given week and see how many times that region appears in the headlines. A place smaller than most provinces commands more international attention than continents 10 times its size, exactly as the text said. This sign is not vague. It is not open to interpretation. It is a verifiable historical event that matches the exact description given in the ancient text thousands of years before it happened in the modern world. And alongside the regathering, the text describes the moral condition of the world in the last days. A return to the conditions that existed in two ancient cities that were destroyed for their complete rejection of moral boundaries. The text says, as it was in those days, so it will be in the days before the end. People eating and drinking, buying and selling, living as though nothing will ever change. Completely unaware that the timeline is closing. Not wicked in the dramatic sense, not villains in a story. Just ordinary people living ordinary lives with absolutely no awareness that the season they are living in carries weight that no other season has ever carried. And that is perhaps the most chilling sign of all. Not the earthquakes, not the wars, not the deception, but the normalcy. The fact that life will feel so routine that most people will not realize what is happening until it is too late. The text says that day will come upon the whole earth like a trap. Not like a slow announcement, not like a scheduled event with a countdown, like a trap, sudden, unexpected, and inescapable for those who are not watching. But it does not have to catch you off guard. The entire reason these signs were written down is so that you would see them coming, so that when the trap springs, you are not standing in it. You are standing apart, and this leads to the most important question. If all of these signs are converging, the wars, the earthquakes, the deception, the falling away, the knowledge explosion, the regathering, the moral drift, then what are you supposed to do? The text does not leave you without an answer. It gives you a clear and direct command for the generation that sees all of these things happening simultaneously. And that command is not to run. It is not to hide. It is not to build a shelter or stockpile supplies or argue on the internet about timelines and dates. The command is far simpler than any of that. And it is far more powerful than anything the world can offer as a response. The text reveals that the final sign before the end is not destruction. It is not chaos. It is completion. The message of the kingdom will be proclaimed across the entire earth as a witness to every nation. And then the end will come. That changes everything. The end does not come because the world falls apart. The end comes because the mission is finished. The message reaches every corner of the earth, and only then does the final chapter open. Which means you are not living in a time of helpless waiting. You are living in a time of active purpose. Every sign that accelerates is also a signal that the mission is approaching its finish line. And your role is not to sit in fear watching the signs pile up. Your role is to be part of the reason the mission gets completed, to carry the message, to live it, to share it, to not grow tired. The text says the one who endures to the end will be saved, not the one who started well, not the one who understood the signs, the one who endured. Endurance is the final instruction for the last generation. Endurance does not mean perfection. It means you keep going. You fall and you get back up. You face pressure and you do not break. You're tempted to quit and you refuse to sit down because you know what is at stake. The signs are not meant to paralyze you. They are meant to position you. Every earthquake, every headline, every shift in the culture is a reminder that the timeline is moving and you have a role in how it ends. You were not born in this generation by accident. Of all the centuries you could have lived in, you are here now, in the generation that sees the convergence, in the window where every sign aligns at once. That is not a curse. That is an assignment. You are alive at the most significant moment in human history, and the text says you're supposed to know it, accept it, and act accordingly with urgency and with faith. So what does that look like practically? It means you guard your heart. You do not let the coldness of the world seep into your chest. You choose love deliberately, even when the people around you stop choosing it. It means you guard your mind. You do not consume every voice that sounds spiritual. You test everything against the text. If a teaching contradicts the written word, it does not matter how popular the teacher is. Walk away. It means you guard your relationships. You surround yourself with people who are also standing. People who will strengthen you when the drift pulls at your ankles. Community is not optional in the last days. It is survival. It means you stay in the text. Not occasionally. Not when it is convenient. Daily. The text is your anchor. When the world shakes, when the deception rises, when the pressure builds, the text is what keeps you steady. And it means you share what you know. You do not keep this understanding to yourself. The mission is not complete until the message reaches every nation, every language, every people group. And you are part of that completion. The signs are not for the fearful. They are for the faithful. They are evidence that the text is true. The timeline is real, and the ending has already been written by the one who holds every outcome in his hands. The world will tell you not to worry about these things. It will tell you life is fine, nothing is changing, everything will continue as it always has. And that response itself is a sign that the text already predicted. Scoffers will come in the last days, people who mock the very idea that there is an end at all. Saying, "Where is the promise of his coming?" Everything continues as it has since the beginning of time without any change. They will point to the stability of their daily routine as evidence that no shift is coming. They will laugh at the people who take the signs seriously. And the text says their laughter is itself confirmation that the signs are real. Do not let their voices drown out what you know to be true. Do not let the mocking of the crowd erase the clarity that comes from reading the text with open eyes. Their comfort is temporary. Your awareness is eternal. The signs of the last days are here. Not coming, not approaching here. Converging in this generation with a precision that no previous century could match. And you're not reading this by accident at this moment in history. The ancient text gave you every sign in advance so you could recognize the season, prepare your heart, strengthen your faith, and fulfill your purpose before the window closes and the final chapter begins to unfold. You do not have to be afraid. Fear is not the appropriate response to the signs. Readiness is, alertness is, action is. The one who sees the signs and does nothing has missed the entire point of why they were given. And the text closes with a promise that holds more weight than every sign combined. A promise given directly to the generation that would witness the convergence and choose to stand firm rather than sit down in defeat. He who testifies to these things says, "Yes, I am coming quickly." That is the final word. Not a threat, not a warning, a promise, from the one whose words have never fallen to the ground unfulfilled. He is coming. And your only job, your single assignment in this generation, is to be found faithful when he arrives. Watching, standing, enduring, ready. That is what the signs were for. That is what you were for. Be ready.